The shuttle touched down with a hiss, its thrusters dispersing a cloud of shimmering gold dust from the landing pad. As John stepped off, he was immediately struck by how little Carathea Prime had changed. The buildings still gleamed with their organic metallic sheen, and the air carried that peculiar floral tang he remembered so well. A small crowd had gathered, waving tentacle-like appendages that looked suspiciously like bouquets. It was oddly touching. John straightened his suit, plastering on the practiced diplomat's smile he'd perfected after years of wrangling treaties between warring species. He scanned the crowd, his eyes searching for someone familiar. Zelthra wasn't just an old friend, she'd been his closest ally during one of the most challenging missions of his career. He owed her a lot, even if her people's customs had often baffled him. As his gaze shifted, a familiar figure surged forward. She was hard to miss, standing a head taller than anyone else in the crowd, her shimmering green skin now adorned with what could only be described as a very loud, and very ceremonial, outfit. John opened his arms reflexively, preparing for the usual Carathian greeting of a light shoulder touch. Instead, Zelthra let out a noise that was somewhere between a cheer and a battle cry and launched herself at him like a guided missile. "John!" she boomed, her voice echoing across the plaza. Before he could respond, she wrapped him in a bear hug that made his ribs creak. "You came back for me, just as you promised." John blinked. "Promised? I mean, I said I'd visit." "Yes. And now, our union can finally be completed," Zelthra announced, her words carrying the same weight as a royal decree. The crowd erupted into cheers, clapping their appendages enthusiastically. "Union?" John asked, his smile faltering. "What union?" Zelthra released him just enough to grip his shoulders, looking him dead in the eye. "You proposed to me, John. Right here on this very spot years ago. I have waited with bated breath for your return so that we may finally bond as life partners." "Proposed? Wait, what?" His mind raced, searching for any memory of such a moment. Then it hit him, the farewell hug. A perfectly innocent, friendly hug he'd given her before departing Carathea Prime. A hug? That was it. No rings, no vows, just two colleagues saying goodbye. Before he could clarify, Zelthra pulled him into a spin, her dress, a monstrosity of glittering alien silk and blinking lights, twirling like an overzealous disco ball. She gestured dramatically toward the crowd. "People of Carathea Prime! The Earthling has returned to honor his sacred promise. Let the preparations begin," she declared, her voice practically shaking the air around them. John's diplomatic instincts kicked in. He held up his hands, laughing nervously. Hold on. There seems to be some kind of misunderstanding here." Zelthra cut him off with a grin that showcased her impossibly sharp teeth. "No misunderstandings, my beloved." The elders confirmed it. "A human gesture of affection, a hug, you called it, signifies a lifelong commitment on Earth, does it not?" The crowd erupted in agreement, chanting, "Hug means love! Hug means love!" John's jaw dropped. "That's not exactly how it works. On Earth, a hug is just friendly." Zelthra frowned, her large, luminous eyes narrowing. "Friendly? You mean to tell me that you, a noble Earth diplomat, would bestow such an intimate gesture upon me without intending to claim me as your partner? Such behavior would be scandalous." "Scandalous? No, it's not like that at all. Humans hug all the time. It's practically our default greeting. We even hug strangers sometimes." He paused, realizing his explanation wasn't helping. If anything, Zelthra's expression was hardening into one of deep offense. "Strangers?" she repeated, her voice dropping into a tone that suggested she was reconsidering whether humans were as civilized as she'd once believed. "So you're saying I'm no different from some random traveler on Earth?" The crowd gasped collectively. Someone in the back shouted, "How dare he disrespect our Zelthra?" John groaned inwardly. This was spiraling out of control. No! You're very different. Special, even. Look, there's just been a cultural misunderstanding, okay? I didn't mean to, propose." Zelthra's expression softened slightly, though her grip on his shoulders remained ironclad. So you're saying it wasn't intentional? Exactly, John said, relief flooding through him. It was a friendly gesture, nothing more. Zelthra tilted her head, her antenna-like appendages twitching thoughtfully. Interesting. Yet, if it was unintentional, why did my heart flutter so fiercely when you embraced me? Why did I spend years dreaming of this moment? John opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He wasn't prepared for this level of emotional vulnerability, let alone in front of a cheering alien crowd. Zelthra leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Did you know I rejected 6 suitors for you? 6. All of them strong, wealthy, and highly compatible by Carathian standards. But I told them no, because I believed in you, John. I believed in us. His mind raced for an escape route, but Zelthra's grip was firm, her eyes shining with what could only be described as unfiltered sincerity. He felt like the villain in some intergalactic rom-com gone horribly wrong. Before he could respond, a booming voice interrupted. Let us honor this sacred union with a traditional Carathian feast. John turned to see an elder Zorathian striding forward, a staff of glowing crystals in hand. He groaned as the crowd roared its approval. Great, he muttered under his breath. Just great. John sat at the center of a long, shimmering banquet table, flanked by Zelthra and several of her elders, all of whom were staring at him like he was the main course. The table was piled high with dishes that defied description, some steaming, others glowing ominously. One platter even appeared to be pulsating, as though it might slither away at any moment. He took a deep breath, plastering on his diplomatic smile. This is, quite the feast. Thank you for the hospitality. Zelthra beamed. Only the finest for my earthling bondmate. Every dish here represents a vital aspect of our union. The glowing blue soup symbolizes clarity in communication. The spiked fruit? Resilience through challenges. And the squirming thing? John asked hesitantly, pointing at the most disturbing dish. Oh, that represents fertility, Zelthra said matter-of-factly, her antennae twitching in amusement. Tradition dictates we feed it to each other to signify our mutual commitment to future offspring. John's fork clattered to his plate. Offspring? That's ambitious, don't you think? It's essential, one of the elders interjected, her voice sharp and authoritative. A union without the promise of progeny is incomplete. Surely, as a diplomat, you understand the importance of fulfilling cultural expectations. John opened his mouth to argue but was silenced by Zelthra gently but firmly placing her hand on his. Don't worry, beloved. I'll guide you through the process. I know your human physiology might struggle to keep up, but I've studied extensively. His face burned, and he nearly choked on the water he just sipped. Studied? What exactly have you studied? Zelthra's expression was innocent, but her tone carried layers of unintended innuendo. Everything about human reproduction, of course. I consulted every available source, scientific texts, fictional accounts, even that strange Earth broadcast you shared during your last visit. John frowned, his brain scrambling to catch up. Broadcast? What broadcast? The one with the energetic mating rituals and dramatic music. I believe it was called, what was it? Ah, yes. Planet of Passionate Primates. He nearly spit his drink across the table. That was a soap opera. Soap? I don't recall anyone cleaning anything. No, it's a fictional drama. None of it is real. It's exaggerated for entertainment, John said, his words tumbling out in a desperate attempt to contain the damage. Zelthra blinked, processing this revelation. So, humans don't perform elaborate acrobatics during courtship? Not unless you're in the circus, John muttered under his breath, earning a few quizzical looks from the elders. One elder, a stern-looking Zorathian with graying antennae, cleared her throat. Regardless of Earth customs, the bonding ceremony requires your participation, Earthling. There will be no shortcuts. Zelthra clapped her hands excitedly. Yes. We must begin the rituals immediately. First, the trial of alignment. But what now? John asked, his stomach sinking. Zelthra stood, her voice ringing out with ceremonial gravitas. The trial of alignment ensures we are perfectly in sync as bond mates. It involves a series of synchronized tasks designed to test our compatibility. John's brain conjured up nightmarish images of alien obstacle courses, but before he could protest, Zelthra had already pulled him to his feet. The crowd cheered as they were led to a circular arena. A towering structure of ropes, hoops, and strange glowing orbs awaited them. First, the Orb of Synchrony, an announcer declared. Zelthra explained with a grin. We must pass the orb back and forth while reciting our vows. It's a test of trust and coordination. Sounds easy enough, John said, though the smug look on the announcer's face suggested otherwise. The orb was handed to them, and John immediately understood why the crowd was so excited. The object was slippery, buzzing faintly, and vibrated unpredictably as if trying to escape their grasp. As they fumbled to keep it aloft, Zelthra began reciting what John assumed were their vows, though the alien language made it sound like a string of tongue twisters. John did his best to repeat the phrases, but his human mouth wasn't built for the sounds. His attempts were met with laughter from the crowd, and even Zelthra struggled to keep a straight face. You're doing wonderfully, beloved, she said, though her tone carried a hint of teasing. Your pronunciation could use some work, though. You just promised to devour my sacred antennae. John groaned, his cheeks burning. Great. I'm a walking mistranslation. The trial continued with increasingly absurd challenges, each designed to highlight their bond. From weaving ceremonial ribbons to balancing on a rotating platform, the events were less about compatibility and more about how much public humiliation John could endure. By the end, he was drenched in sweat, his hair sticking to his forehead, while Zelthra looked as radiant as ever. As they finished the final task, the crowd erupted into cheers. Zelthra turned to him, her eyes gleaming with triumph. We did it! The elders will be so pleased. Thrilled, I'm sure, John muttered, trying to catch his breath. What's next? The trial of public ridicule? Zelthra tilted her head thoughtfully. No, that comes after the binding feast. John groaned. Of course it does. As they were led back to the banquet table, John couldn't help but wonder how much worse this could get. Then he caught sight of the elders whispering among themselves, their expressions conspiratorial. His gut told him the answer was a lot worse. The binding feast began with all the grandeur of an intergalactic awards ceremony, complete with glowing lanterns suspended mid-air and music that sounded like someone was strangling a bagpipe. John sat uncomfortably at the head table, Zelthra beaming beside him while alien servers darted around, placing more dishes in front of him than he could ever hope to eat. I must admit, I'm impressed by your resilience, Zelthra said, her voice filled with admiration. Most beings would have crumbled during the trial of alignment. But you rose to the challenge. Yeah, well, John replied, poking at a dish that hissed when his fork touched it. I've always been good at pretending I know what I'm doing. Modesty is so charming, she said with a warm laugh, her antennae twitching in amusement. I can see why Earthlings are renowned for their charisma. Before John could protest that he wasn't trying to be charming, an elder stood and struck her staff on the ground, calling for silence. We now proceed to the blessing of truth. This is the moment where bondmates share their innermost thoughts and feelings with each other, ensuring a future built on honesty. The crowd clapped enthusiastically as Zelthra turned to him, her expression suddenly serious. Beloved, this is an important moment. You must open your heart and speak freely. John forced a smile, panic bubbling under the surface. Sure. Honesty. That's great. Zelthra went first, her voice ringing with emotion. John, from the moment we met, I felt a connection unlike anything I've known. Your courage, your kindness, your peculiar human quirks. All of it made me realize there was no one else I would rather share my life with. I knew deep down that you were the one. The crowd let out an audible "ah," and John felt a lump form in his throat, not from emotion, but from sheer anxiety. How was he supposed to follow that without shattering her expectations? He cleared his throat. Zelthra, you've been an incredible friend. And, I've always admired your dedication. And your, strength. You're truly one of a kind. There was a pause. Then another. The crowd's silence grew heavier by the second. Finally, an elder coughed pointedly. Is that all, Earthling? Well, John started, but Zelthra interrupted, her expression now tinged with confusion. Wait. Are you nervous? She asked, leaning in. There's no need for fear, beloved. This is a safe space. Share your truth. John's internal alarms were screaming. He was trapped, cornered by the weight of her expectations and the watchful eyes of an entire alien society. Okay, here's the thing, he began, deciding that honesty, well, a version of it, was his only way out. Where I come from, things move a bit slower. Humans take their time when it comes to, life commitments. Zelthra nodded, her expression thoughtful. So you prefer an extended courtship? Fascinating. But fear not, beloved. I am patient. If it takes years, decades even, I will wait. Years? John echoed, his voice a strangled squeak. Of course. What's a few decades when your heart is set on someone? Her sincerity was overwhelming, and John felt an uncomfortable mix of guilt and exasperation. She was sweet, sure, but this whole situation was teetering on the edge of a cosmic farce. Before he could respond, another elder stood, raising a gnarled hand. Enough stalling! Proceed with the final ritual! John turned to Zelthra, alarmed. Final ritual? What final ritual? The vows of binding, she said with a radiant smile. Don't worry, it's a simple exchange. We declare our commitment, and then the binding crystal will glow to signify our unity. Glow? What happens if it doesn't glow? He asked, grasping for any loophole. Her smile faltered slightly. That would be unheard of. The binding crystal always glows. It's a sacred artifact, a reflection of our shared intent. Intent. That was the key. John latched onto the word like a drowning man clutching a life raft. Maybe, just maybe, if he didn't mean the vows, the crystal wouldn't glow. It was a long shot, but it was the only plan he had. They were led to a raised platform where the binding crystal, a large, pulsating orb, hovered in midair. Zelthra took his hand, her touch warm and steady. Repeat after me, she said softly. John nodded, steeling himself. If he could just muddle through this without genuine intent, he might have a way out. Zelthra began, her voice clear and strong. I, Zelthra of Karathia Prime, vow to cherish and protect my bond mate for all eternity. John repeated the words as carefully as possible, keeping his tone neutral. I, John of Earth, vow to cherish and protect my bond mate for all eternity. The crowd murmured in approval, and Zelthra's grip on his hand tightened. I vow to honor our union and embrace our future together. John hesitated. I vow to, honor our understanding and, respect our future possibilities. A ripple of confusion spread through the audience, but Zelthra didn't seem to notice. Her eyes were locked on his, filled with anticipation. The moment of truth had arrived. No, she said. We touched the crystal. John swallowed hard as their hands moved toward the glowing orb. His mind raced with conflicting thoughts, guilt, panic, and a desperate hope that the universe would cut him a break. Their hands connected with the crystal, and for a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. The crowd gasped. John felt a surge of relief, until the orb suddenly flared to life, bathing the platform in a blinding golden light. The audience erupted into cheers. Zelthra beamed, her joy radiating like a supernova. It glows! Our bond is true! John stared at the crystal, dumbfounded. You've got to be kidding me. The cheers had barely died down when Zelthra's rival, a towering Zorathian female with jet-black skin and glittering silver markings, stormed onto the platform. Her dramatic entrance sent murmurs through the crowd, and John instinctively knew things were about to get worse. Zelthra! The newcomer bellowed, her voice dripping with indignation. You dare claim the Earthling as your bondmate without consulting me? Zelthra stepped forward, her demeanor shifting from radiant joy to icy defiance. Larvith, this is neither the time nor the place for your antics. Oh, but it is, Larva said with a sly grin, her sharp teeth glinting in the light of the binding crystal. The Earthling and I share a history too. Did you think I wouldn't have a claim? John's head whipped back and forth between them. Hold on. History? What history? Larvith turned to him, her expression softening slightly. Do you not remember, John? When you visited our outpost years ago, you offered me the earth gesture of pinky promise. Surely you understand the significance of such a sacred act? A pinky promise? You're joking, John said, his voice rising. That's something kids do on Earth. It's not sacred, it's barely serious. Larvith gasped, her antennae stiffening in outrage. Not serious? You entwined your appendage with mine and swore a vow. On Karathia, that is a binding prelude to courtship. Of course it is, John muttered, running a hand through his hair. What else did I do on this planet that I should know about? Zelthra's eyes narrowed, stepping protectively between him and Larvith. Enough of this nonsense. The crystal has spoken. The bond is true. Or manipulated, Larvith countered, her tone cutting. What if the Earthling was coerced into these rituals? I demand a challenge of truth. The crowd erupted in a mix of gasps and excited murmurs. John groaned. A challenge? Why does this feel like it's going to involve more public humiliation? Zelthra squared her shoulders, glaring at Larvith. Very well. If you wish to embarrass yourself further, I accept. But be warned, the challenge of truth will leave no doubt about who is truly destined for John. Great, John muttered under his breath. Just what I wanted, 2 aliens fighting over me in a public spectacle. The elders quickly arranged the challenge, which consisted of 3 rounds. The first was a compatibility test, where Zelthra and Larvith were required to predict John's preferences based on their supposed understanding of him. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena. First question, what is John's favorite earth beverage? Zelthra answered confidently. Liquid stimulant known as coffee. Larvith smirked. Incorrect. During his time at our outpost, he frequently requested a fermented drink called beer. John raised a hand weakly. They're both right. Can we move on? The crowd laughed, clearly enjoying his discomfort. The next question wasn't any better. What is John's most valued possession? His ceremonial attire, Zelthra declared, pointing to his rumpled suit. False, Larvith countered. It is his small, handheld communication device. Okay, let's stop pretending this is a quiz show, John interjected, his voice laced with frustration. Neither of those things are my most valued possession. The announcer blinked. Then what is it? My sanity, John muttered, earning another round of laughter from the audience. The second round was a physical test. Zelthra and Larvith were tasked with retrieving a ceremonial artifact hidden somewhere in the arena. The spectacle was less a test of skill and more a comedy of errors as both women navigated absurd obstacles while hurling insults at each other. As the third and final round approached, John had reached his limit. He stood abruptly, cutting through the crowd's chatter. Enough! This is ridiculous! The arena fell silent as he turned to face both Zelthra and Larvith. Look, I get it. Your culture has all these traditions and interpretations, but this whole thing has spiraled out of control. I never meant to promise myself to anyone. I was just trying to be polite and respectful. Zelthra's expression faltered, her confidence crumbling. So, you don't care for me? John sighed, softening his tone. It's not that I don't care. You're amazing, Zelthra. And Larvith, I barely know you, but I'm sure you're great too. The problem is I'm human. We don't form lifelong bonds because of a hug or a pinky promise. It takes time, trust, and mutual understanding. The elders exchanged uncertain glances, whispering among themselves. Finally, the eldest among them spoke. It seems we have misjudged the Earthling's customs. Perhaps we should reconsider the binding. The relief washing over John was short-lived as Larva stepped forward, her tone sharp. Fine. But if the bond is nullified, I propose we still honor the Earthling in another way. Oh no, John said, his instincts kicking in. What now? Larva grinned. As a symbol of unity, let us name him an honorary ambassador of Carathea Prime. A title that ensures he must return frequently. The crowd cheered, clearly enamored with the idea. Zelthra's face lit up again. Yes. An excellent compromise. You'll still visit, and who knows? Perhaps over time, you will see the value of a deeper bond. John's shoulders slumped. Ambassador? That sounds suspiciously like a full-time job. It's a great honor, Zelthra said, clasping his hand. And it means I'll still get to see you. Larva smirked. And I as well. John rubbed his temples, wondering how he always managed to find himself in these situations. Fine. Ambassador it is. But for the record, I'm expecting hazard pay. The crowd erupted in celebration, and John couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. As Zelthra pulled him into another enthusiastic hug, he muttered under his breath. At least this time, everyone knows what a hug really means.